Okay, so you know how sometimes when you're in a store and it's like in a different country or they just speak a different language and you're trying to like figure out where things are or how to ask for something?
Yeah,
We thought today we would give you some super practical English just for going shopping in a store.
I like it.
And so we found some really great materials that are super focused on like the words and phrases that you'll actually hear and use.
Yeah,
And really what we want to do is just make your next trip to the store feel a little bit easier and more comfortable.
that's the goal.
Yeah. So let's jump into some of this stuff that can really help you out.
Yeah, so what's really interesting is that mastering just a small set of vocabulary and key phrases can really give you a huge advantage in navigating these kinds of situations.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're focusing on today, just practical communication, the things that you'll need to find what you need, understand prices, and interact smoothly with staff.
Yeah.
Just the essentials.
So, okay, let's dive right into some of the words that you'll probably see.
Okay.
The first one is aisle.
Okay.
And this is kind of a funny word to say, but you know how in a store you have all the shelves and then you have like the long space in between the shelves?
Right.
That's called the aisle.
Got it.
So if you're looking for, let's say, cereal, you could
Yeah.
say, excuse me, I'm looking for the cereal aisle.
Makes sense.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and I think understanding that word aisle is really fundamental because that's how you're going to get around the store.
Right.
And it's interesting to think about how those store layouts can vary so much.
Yeah.
In some places they're numbered, in some places they're just organized by, type of product.
Yeah,
And so just knowing that word aisle really helps you kind of bridge those gaps.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, what about cart
Okay.
or trolley?
Trolley. Yeah.
You'll hear both.
Right.
And basically, this is just the wheel basket that you push around
Right.
to put all your stuff in.
Exactly.
So when you walk into the store, you could say, could I get a cart, please?
Yeah, and it's interesting too because, you can use cart and trolley pretty interchangeably. They both work in most places, but there are certain regions where, one might be more popular than the other.
Yeah.
Trolley tends to be a little more common in British English, for example.
Right.
But it's good to know both so that you can understand and be understood.
Yeah. And it just kind of makes you think like, are there other things in the store where the name might change depending on where you are?
Totally.
Like what else?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay, so this one's pretty easy checkout,
Check out.
like where you pay for your stuff.
Right, right.
So you could say, I'll meet you at the checkout
Exactly.
if you're with
Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah. It's that kind of key moment, like, you're ready to pay.
Yeah.
Um, and it's interesting too because you see different kinds of checkouts.
Yeah.
You've got the self-service and then the cashier operated.
Right.
Each one's a little different interaction.
That's true.
Okay.
So now everyone loves to save money.
Absolutely.
So this next one is discount.
Discount. Yeah.
It's just like a reduction in price.
Right.
So you might see a sign and it'll say, these t-shirts are 30% off.
30% off. Wow.
And the percentage is really important there because it tells you like exactly how much money you're going to save.
Right.
What's really interesting is how, they use these different kinds of discounts to try to attract people.
It's true.
Like you might see a percentage or you might see something like $5 off your next purchase.
Right.
So you just kind of have to pay attention and see what kind of deal they're offering.
Yeah. Have you noticed any other sort of common ways that they'll advertise these discounts?
I've definitely seen the buy one, get one half off,
Oh, yeah.
which can be tricky to calculate sometimes.
Eh.
Okay, and then the last one for the vocabulary is receipt.
Okay. Receipts.
So this is the slip of paper that you get after you pay.
Right.
And it's like your proof of purchase.
Got it.
So you would want to ask, can I have my receipt, please?
Yeah. And it's not just a piece of paper, right?
Yeah.
It's actually a record of what you bought.
Right.
And it's super important if you want to return something
Yeah.
or exchange it.
Yeah.
And also, just keeping track of how much you're spending.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you noticed some stores are doing those digital receipts now too?
Yeah, more and more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually pretty convenient.
It is. Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered aisle cart or trolley checkout, discount, and receipt.
Okay.
So those are some of the like really important words that you'll see.
Right.
Now let's see how we might actually use these in a sentence.
Okay, cool.
So instead of just saying aisle,
Yeah.
you might say something like, could you direct me to the pet food aisle?
Right. So you're adding the product to the aisle.
Right.
Which is much more specific.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're not just asking like, do you have this?
Right.
You're saying, I want to go to this place.
Exactly.
What about checkout? You could say, after I find everything, I'll head to the nearest checkout.
Right.
So that way you're making it clear that the checkout is where you pay.
Yeah.
and that you're going there once you've found your stuff.
Yeah, and that kind of shows how these basic vocabulary words can be integrated into natural speech,
Yeah,
right? It's not just knowing the words, it's knowing how to use them in sentences.
totally. Okay, so now that we have a really good base with those vocabulary words, let's move on to some of the phrases that you can actually use when you're in the store.
Okay.
So the first one is super helpful for finding things,
Yeah.
and it's where can I find, and then whatever the item is.
Oh.
You can say like, where can I find the coffee?
Right.
That's super easy.
Yeah, and that's really like your go-to for navigating the store.
Yeah,
You know, you can swap out that item for anything you're looking for.
right.
But it's interesting to note that the phrasing is polite, right?
Yeah.
It's where can I find?
Yeah.
It's not like tell me where this is. You're being a little bit more courteous and helpful.
Yeah, you want to be polite.
Yes.
Okay, this next one is really important for making sure that you don't spend too much money.
Okay, good.
How much is this?
How much is this?
Or how much does this cost?
Right.
So if you're holding like a book, you could say, how much is this book?
Right.
So you know how much it is before you decide whether you're going to buy it.
Yeah, you have to know the price.
Yeah.
That's fundamental.
And are there any other ways that you might ask about the price?
Yeah, you could also just say, what's the price of this?
Yeah.
That works too.
Okay, so if you're buying clothes or shoes or really anything that comes in different sizes,
Right.
you'll need to know this one, do you have this in a different size?
Okay.
So if you're holding a sweater, you could say, do you have this sweater in a large?
Right.
This is especially helpful for like retail environments.
Yeah, because fit is so important.
Yeah.
So, if you look at something and the size isn't right,
Yeah.
you need to be able to ask for alternatives. Yeah.
So you know what happens if they don't have your size in stock?
Oh, you could say, do you know if you'll be getting more?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good follow-up.
Okay, so let's say you're in a store and you just want to look around and you don't want somebody coming up to you and trying to help you right away.
Right.
You can say, I'm just looking, thank you.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
So that way you're still being polite,
Yes.
but you're also setting a boundary.
Yeah, you're acknowledging their presence, but also telling them you don't need help right now.
Right.
Are there any other ways to kind of politely decline help if someone comes up to you?
You could say, I'm all set for now, thank you.
Yeah, perfect.
And then let's say you actually need help with something.
Okay.
You could say, could you please help me?
Right.
Or, excuse me, could you help me?
Yeah.
Adding please makes it more polite.
Of course. Always.
And so that's just a way to get somebody's attention if you need help,
Exactly.
maybe finding something or you don't understand the product or whatever. Yeah, it's that clear, respectful way to get their attention.
Okay, so we've gone through some really good vocabulary and some phrases.
Okay.
So now to see how this all comes together in like a real shopping situation, let's walk through a little scenario.
I like it.
So let's say you, our listener, you're at the store and you need to buy oatmeal
Okay.
and you see an employee and you go up to them.
Right.
What do you say to find the oatmeal?
Well, you could use one of those key phrases we talked about for finding items.
Right, so you could say, hi, excuse me, where can I find the oatmeal?
Perfect.
Super easy.
Very clear, very concise, very courteous.
Yeah, and then the employee might say something like, the oatmeal is in aisle 4 on the bottom shelf.
Right.
So you're using some of that key vocabulary there.
Exactly.
Now let's say you find the oatmeal, and there are a couple of different kinds,
Okay.
and you're not really sure which one you want.
Right.
You pick one up.
Okay.
What could you ask?
Well, you could use that phrase we talked about for checking the price.
Right? So you could say, excuse me, how much is this? Perfect. While holding up the oatmeal.
Yeah, nice.
And they might say, oh, that one is $3.50.
Okay.
So then you've decided, okay, I want this oatmeal.
Yeah.
So what could you say next?
Well, you could just say, okay, great.
Yeah.
I'll take this.
Perfect.
And then obviously when you're ready to pay, you'll go to the checkout
Right. And ask for your receipt.
and ask for your receipt. Exactly.
Okay, so you could say, can I have my receipt, please?
Very good.
So you can see how these few little tools can really help you get through the whole shopping experience.
You did it.
Yeah.
You navigated that whole interaction.
Now, we really encourage you, our listener, to practice saying these things out loud.
Yeah.
Because, it might feel a little weird at first,
Right.
but it's the best way to get comfortable with those sounds and just like the rhythm of the language.
Repetition is so key.
Yeah.
And the good news is that by, actually saying the words out loud, you're building muscle memory and increasing your confidence.
Yeah.
Which is what we want.
Okay, so let's try a couple more.
Okay.
So imagine that you're looking for milk.
Okay.
Go ahead and say out loud, where can I find the milk?
Good.
And you can do that a couple of times.
Yeah, notice how you're using that where can I find structure?
Yeah.
Try it again a little faster.
Yeah.
Just to get the flow.
Okay, what about this?
Okay.
You see a scarf that you like,
Right.
and you want to know how much it costs.
Okay.
So say out loud, how much is this scarf?
Very good.
Good. And try to pay attention to your intonation.
Yeah, because in English, a lot of times, questions will have a rising intonation at the end.
Yeah.
Try it again and kind of focus on that upward inflection.
Okay, last one.
Okay.
You need help reaching something on a really high shelf.
Happens all the time.
So say, excuse me, could you please help me with this?
Wonderful.
That was very polite.
Yeah, I heard that, like, excuse me, in that play.
Yeah.
Very good.
All right, so today we've taken a really practical deep dive into the English that you need for shopping at a store.
Yeah.
We covered some of the most essential vocabulary like aisle and discount.
Right.
We learned some really common phrases for asking questions.
Yeah.
Like, where can I find something? How much is this?
Right.
And we even walked through that really realistic shopping scenario.
Exactly.
And really, the whole point of today is to make you feel more comfortable and more confident when you're in that kind of situation.
Yeah, the aim isn't to be perfectly fluent overnight, right?
Right.
It's about giving you these tools
Yeah.
that you can use right away.
You make it a little bit easier.
Less stressful.
Yeah. And remember, the more that you practice these, the more natural they'll become.
Yeah, a little bit of practice every day goes a long way.
So just for you to think about, what are some other things that you might need to buy at the store
Yeah.
or other interactions that you might have?
Like, what about returning something?
Yeah.
Or asking for a specific brand?
Yeah. And how would you adapt the words and phrases that we talked about to those situations?
Right.
What other questions might you need to ask?
That's a great exercise
Yeah.
to really apply what you've learned
Yeah.
and prepare yourself.
So that brings us to the end of our deep dive.
It does.
We hope this was really helpful and that you feel ready for your next shopping trip.
Happy shopping, everyone.
Yeah, we'll catch you next time.
See you next time.